Okay. All right. Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to be talking about software architecture. And actually, the slides I'm using are from a really good book on software architecture called the book speaks particularly about architectural design and the process of designing architecture. But I'm just using one chapter from the book that introduces you software architecture concepts and what's important and what you need to think about and so on. And you had done some software architecture, Mr. Anderson and myself, in software engineering. The source is really about object-oriented design. It's not really about software architecture per se, but many of the concepts that they have learned in object-oriented design and the principles they apply at that higher level to your software architecture as well. Also, the diagrams that you learned, the last three UML diagrams that you learned, package diagrams, component diagrams, and component diagrams, they are the main diagrams that we utilize from the UML suite of diagrams for documenting architecture. No, you can use other methods for documenting architecture. It doesn't have to be UML. You can use box and line diagrams. You can use modeling approaches like context diagrams and so on. They also speak to the architecture of the system. Um, but since we're learning UML and looking at things from an object-oriented perspective, don't just talk a little bit about software architecture. Usually there's a lecture that I would do that talks a lot about a whole lot of details, goes into a lot of details. But I'm not going to go into those details now because we did do a lot of architecture last year. We did learn about architecture, not last year, last Thursday, 2140, and architecture is just covered in that course. So this is just in the context of the object-oriented design course. So, as we said when we looked at architecture, at design patterns, one of the reasons why we want to learn software architecture, and one of the reasons why we want to learn architectural patterns is because you don't want to be boring. You don't want to be stuck as a programmer forever, right? Anybody wants to be a programmer forever? Yeah, that's what you want to do all the time. I mean, programmers aren't necessarily poor. Like if you program and you develop something that's brand new, like a novel type of thing, like what's his name? Zuckerberg, what's his name? Right, like how he came up with Facebook and so on. Then yeah, that's cool. But the point is that most people want to program for a certain number of years, and usually after a while, when you have honed your skills really well as a programmer, you understand technologies very well. Usually, you want to advance to becoming more of a designer, the person who envisions what are the best decisions to make about the design of the software and hand that over to programmers. That's probably what you want to do. And so that motivates us to learn software architecture. Software architecture and actually architecting software can be difficult because there are a number of different things to consider. The main thing that drives the software architecture, as you should remember from last semester, are the non-functional requirements, the quality characteristics, right? So availability and performance on those things. And you also learned last semester that these things trade off against each other. Sometimes in order to achieve a high level of modularity, you have to give up a little bit of your performance. Or sometimes to get really good performance, you might give up some of the fault tolerance because you cut down on the amount of redundancy to make the system perform faster and things like that. So there are different things that you might think about and trade off. You have to be familiar with a lot of technologies so you can pick the technologies that meet the requirements that you have well, because the architect not only does design like in UML, but they also recommend the technologies that you use to implement the architecture because the different technologies like different frameworks, programming languages, different servers, different load balancers and so on will help you to achieve different ones of the quality characteristics that are non-functional. And so because of that, you need to be familiar, even if you're not using them every day, you tend to need to be familiar with the landscape of technologies, which you know is growing rapidly daily. If you go to sleep tonight and wake up tomorrow morning, there's probably a new language or a new framework or a new something, some new tool that you can use, some new IDE and some new database or some optimization, some new to know what these are. So you might not be able to know every single thing, but you need to be familiar with the landscape. So architects tend to be subscribed to magazines and newsletters and channels and so on that will keep them up to date, even though they might not necessarily be using the technology all the time. Because you're not necessarily programming all the details all the time. Even if you were programming, you'd probably be using a limited range of products or tools, right? But there's a wide landscape, so you have to find a way to keep up to date and so on. But the point is that it's a complex thing, and not everybody's going to be a genius at it. And so it's good to have the book I'm saying about what it's really about is actually a step-by-step approach to architectural design. So it's good to have methods like that. And they help everybody, even if you're young, even if you're new, even if you've only graduated 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. Just like design patterns and architectural patterns, well described methodologies for architecture design does help. So anyway, what is software architecture? I think you saw this definition last semester. So the software architecture of a system is the set of structures needed to reason about the system, which comprise software elements, relations among them, and the properties of code. It's a mouthful. What does that mean? Nothing. So the first part, it is the set of structures needed. I set of structures here. Let me tell you what that structure is. Let's look at the human body. We have different structures in our body. It's one body, but there are different structures. And those structures help us to reason about different aspects of our being and different characteristics that we can have, right? So for example, Candice is short and I'm tall, right? There are different structures that would explain that. For instance, if you look at my skeletal structure, is that my bones are longer than hers. And so I'll be taller than her, and that's the explanation for why it's taller than her. But what if Candice's legs started to swell? You know, all the time her legs were swollen. If you look at her skeletal structure to find out why her legs are swollen, what would you look at? Biology. What would you look at? Her circulatory system. So there's one structure that is the circulatory structure, another one that's the skeletal structure. And then if Candice's fingers kept getting numb, or she kept feeling tingling all the time in her fingers, or you know, she was acting like sometimes no one what's wrong with her, what system would we look at? We look at her nervous system. But Candice is only one person, right? So like that, in the same way in software, they have different structures. So you have the component structure that tells you about the components of the software. You have runtime structures. You can have runtime structures, for example. You can look at the physical structure, like how the files are going to be laid out, and then you might start thinking about the deployment diagrams and so on. So the point is that you can use these different diagrams to represent these different structures, and those different diagrams for different structures can represent like different views of the system. So depending on what we want to achieve and what we want to talk about and who our stakeholders are, we will document different aspects of our software, right? But they are all a part of the architecture. So back to the definition. The software architecture of a system is a set of structures needed to reason about the system. So you can see how this makes sense now, right? Which comprise, and they consist of software elements, the relations among them, and the properties. So when you're documenting a software architecture, I won't use none of the details in this course. If you were to do a software architecture course, you would focus on different structures and you document each of those structures. When you're documenting each structure, you look at all the parts of those structures. So if you're looking at the physical structure, you might do a package diagram and you document all the details related to the package, which classes are in which packages and things like that. You look at how those packages are connected to each other. Who is importing what? In other words, remember those dependency relationships that we saw in class diagrams, you put those in place. Are there particular interfaces that facilitate those communications between the packages? You will document those and explain them. You look at a component diagram, we document every interface and all those interfaces, who provides them, who requires them, and things like that. So you use your component diagrams to do that. In truth, in real life, You would not necessarily use UML diagrams or UML diagrams alone. People use combinations of diagrams in architecture document. Comments? Somebody was a comment? Okay, does somebody have a question or comment? No? Right, so you talk about the different elements in each structure and how they relate to each other and the properties of them. So, why is software architecture important? So, the first point we have there is an architecture will inhibit or enable a system's driving quality attributes. What does that mean? Anybody?
This architectural charts.
Right. So it will ensure, or the architecture will not so much ensure, but the architecture actually dictates how well the system will perform, how available it's going to be, how much fault tolerance it will have. It will determine how fast it's going to be, how reliable it is, how usable it is, how modifiable it is, how maintainable it is, all those quality characteristics. Whatever your architecture is, that's what is going to determine those quality characteristics. So either it's going to be done well enough to cause it to not, it's going to be done well enough to cause it to meet those quality characteristics, like what you said, David, or it's going to be done in a way that we don't achieve those quality characteristics. But the point is that the architecture of the system is what drives it. This means that whether you have a good architecture or not, as a matter of fact, the term good architecture is not even the best term to use. The thing about it is that what is a good architecture for one set of quality attributes might be a bad architecture for another situation. So whether you thought about it and processed it and designed the architecture properly, or you just jumped up one day and said, okay, I'm going to start coding. And you just started coding and you didn't really think through it properly. At the end of the day, when you're finished and you said, this is my product, or this is what my client asked for, you will have an architecture. No matter how badly designed it is for the situation, it is your architecture. So every piece of software that you're working on now for your presentations, I can look at it and I can tell you, I can sketch it and say, okay, this is what architecture is like. It may or may not be suitable for the situation that you're in, but you will have an architecture. If you sit down and you write one big main program, just one big main, and you put everything inside of it, you have an architecture. It's probably the worst architecture you could possibly have, but it will be an architecture. Or you could sit down and you could strategically think through when you want the system to be very modifiable, you want to be able to replace components, you want to make the components replaceable, right? And so you say, okay, I'm going to, take a component-based approach to this. I'm going to make my interfaces very simple and well-defined, and you're going to say, well, I'm going to let each component only be dependent on interfaces, and they'll never have to know the details of the implementations of the components in order to work. And those are good strategies to ensure that you have modifiability, maintainability, reusability, replaceability. Because those facilitate information hiding, and information hiding drives those characteristics. The decisions made in an architecture allow you to reason about and manage change as the system evolves. Does that make any sense to you? Yes, kind of, yeah. So, by architecture here, we mean the documented architecture, having made a decision and written it down and made sketches, and everybody knows that this is the architecture of the system. One of the benefits, what we're saying here is that one of the benefits of doing that is that if there's a need for a change, you can look at, let's say somebody comes and says, okay, they no longer want this functionality, they want functionality, some other functionality. If the documentation, if the architecture is documented and it's well understood, it's clear what the architecture is. Yeah, it is easier one because you might have made decisions about reusability. You would have known that you need to replace components from time to time because that would have been a part of your requirements. So you'd have known that. But in addition to that, it's easy to tell where this functionality should go. It's also easy to tell the rationale for architectural decisions that had been made previously, and having, because the documentation usually requires you to explain each decision. So all the things that you decide, the official architectural documentation standards usually require, so things like IEEE standard guidelines or the ISO, but there's international guidelines for how you do the documentation. Then different organizations will have variances of it. If you look at it, one of the things that you need to do is specify architectural decisions that lead to a particular design, and you have to give a rationale for them. If that rationale is clear, then people will not make mistakes about how they implement changes because they will know why. So I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you had to work on software that somebody else worked on, and you ask yourself, why did they do this? And because you don't know why, you might just dump that and do something else. But there might be a rationale for it, right? The analysis of an architecture enables early prediction of a system's qualities. Again, as I said before, if you analyze the architecture, if you look at the architectural documentation, look at architectural decisions, you can actually, without even implementing the system, wouldn't that be great? That you didn't have to implement the system to find out that it's slow. Wouldn't that be good? If you don't have to implement the system to find out it's slow, or to find out how fast it operates, or to find out how reliable it is, to find out how available it is, to find out how usable it is, you can actually look at architectural documentation and recognize what the system that's going to be implemented, if it follows these architectural guidelines, what the quality characteristics are going to be early. And this is important because it reduces risk, project risk. Yeah. A documented architecture enhances communication among stakeholders. Again, having good documentation helps everybody to understand where we're going, where we're coming from, where we're going, and why we're going there, right? It's a carrier of the earliest and hence most fundamental, hardest to change design decisions. You know, you should know from programming that once you have made certain decisions about how your program is going to be organized, you kind of have to program into that space no matter what happens afterwards. So if you have decided, okay, this program is going to have these 4 components and they're connected this way by these interfaces, like everything that you do is based on that, based on those set of decisions. Even if later on you realize that that component is not supposed to be there. You have already programmed certain things in there, you have connected parts in particular kinds of ways, you have, connected the user interface and so on. So what will you do? If you have made a bad decision, people end up doing things like, okay, although the UI should have UI functionalities only in there, since I didn't remember or didn't realize that I needed to put something in for accounting, I'll just add the feature for it right here. In the user interface, you can click on the accounting button, and instead of the accounting button just running the code for what you'd really want to identify a user interface to do is when you click on a button, it runs an event. It runs like an event handler that basically has inside of it code that calls the functionality that you want. Code that calls the functionality that you want, right? But instead, you'll be forced, which I'm sure everybody has experienced this sometime, you'll be forced to stuff that functionality into the user interface. You've never had that experience? Where you just kind of realize that you're in a situation and to try to fix it is just crazy. So you just have to just kind of just squeeze some things in that you never planned to. So, you know, the accounting now start to have you like the accounting functionality might have user interface things in there or something like that because you just can't fix it. So the idea is to analyze things in such a way that you kind of figure out what are the most important functionality that needs to be implemented, what are the quality attributes that need to be met, and you know what do the regular standards say, general documented standards say about how you achieve those functionality, and you select your design patterns and your architectural patterns and your architectural tactics to satisfy that. Yeah.
Kind of, is there no situation where hard coding functionality into the interface?
It depends on the, yeah, if the functionality is a UI functionality, then yeah, you do that. But you don't want to put business logic in the user interface. You want that to be in a layer, and then the UI only depends on that. The problem if you put the business functionality in the UI, then if you wanted to change the UI or add an additional UI, you'd also have to take that into consideration, which is just too much work, especially 5 years after the system has been deployed. So 5 years after the system has been deployed, they discover that they have a user interface problem and it's not the best user interface. Instead of implementing a user interface and not having to worry, so you are not having to worry about the business logic, you're going to now have to implement a user interface and not just say add account, you know, like have buttons that say add account and then that calls the add account functionality and a button that says show me this and it just calls that functionality and so on. You now have to program details into the UI. And 5 years later, nobody wants to think about that problem again. That's just a nightmare. So that's why we don't want to pack things into the UI. And that's just one example. If any single part of any single class or component has their own overall responsibility, and if you keep it really nice and clean and compact or cohesive, it makes it easy to replace it or to add another option. So, you know, to add another option to how you want to deliver that particular service. Where are we? So an architecture defines a set of constraints on subsequent implementation. That's basically the same thing we're saying again. That can be a good thing. Once you have designed the architecture, it provides a set of constraints upon which or within which developers now have to implement the solution. Yeah. The architecture influences the structure of an organization and vice versa. So sometimes, I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this or seen this, but sometimes you can deploy software in an organization. It forces the organization to have to restructure. So yeah, so I don't want to say force because usually that is something that you agree on before. You kind of know that that's what's going to happen. So like I worked in this company where I was like the main IT person, but I wasn't the developer. They had outsourced this work. But it was an insurance company. And they had an underwriting department. They had a claims department. Sorry, they didn't have an underwriting department. They had different, everybody understands insurance somewhat? So insurance is insuring means that you know that there's a risk of a particular thing happening. And so you go and you pay for some insurance. Like if it happens, they will give you some money to help you with the problem, right? So one of the risks of things happening is people can die. And so if you die, you'd really like to have your family get some money if you die. Or you could crash your car, or somebody could steal a car and you'd like to get some help. Deal with that if it were to happen. So you pay a small amount of money every month or every year. And in the rare event that it may happen, the insurance company is supposed to pay you back, right? Insurance companies rely on the fact that generally underwriting means figuring out the risk that something is going to happen and figuring out what's the right amount of premium so that by the time it happens, so then you like actuaries think a lot about that. So by the time the thing should happen, they would have collected enough money from you and from the other persons who have the same risk so that they can afford to pay you when the time comes. So they have to figure out how many people it could possibly happen to and how likely it is to happen or how long it will take before it happens by looking at probabilities and then how much money they are likely to have to pay. So if you have what's the expensive car? If you have a Toyota Prado, like a 2017, what's that? if you have a Mercedes, I find Mercedes aren't that expensive unless they're really brand new, like they lose their value fast. But an Audi or whatever. But some vehicle that's worth like $15 million. We're talking Jamaican dollars now, people in Asia, in Barbados. 15 million Jamaican dollars or whatever. Yeah. So 15 million Jamaican dollars. And then, you know, I have a car that's worth like 2 million Jamaican dollars. And my insurance is going to be lower than yours. My premium is going to be lower than yours. And because it's more expensive to replace your car, right? So that's how insurance works. I have to figure that out. So the underwriters were responsible for underwriting risk. So figuring out whether or not they can afford to underwrite or to take a risk, and then figuring out how much you'd have to pay to make it worth their while. That's basically what underwriters do. So you had underwriters for property, underwriters for underwriters for property, underwriters for motor vehicles. Those are the two main sections. But they had another one. They had, no. So they had people who did, let's just say they had underwriting for motor vehicles, underwriting for property, and let's say they had houses, buildings, right? So they had those two underwriting departments. Plus they had claims, and within claims, they had two different types of claims. So they had one separate department for underwriting for claims against property, like buildings, and one for motor vehicle claims. So if your car crashed and you want some money, you go to them and they check your insurance and see if the particular problem was covered and whether or not they owe you some money, and then they would make everything. They'd send investigators to go and check to see if it's you mash up the car on purpose and things like that. And then eventually it will settle and you get your money. So that's what claims did. Then you had this section that dealt with accounting, how much money they're getting, how much they have to spend, how much they have to put into different things. So that's accounting. And then you had payroll and so on. So they had all these different departments. Anyway, so this new system came along, and the new system the system was designed to automate, because all this was manual, by the way. Oh, and they had a data center. So everybody, all the claims people, underwriters, accountants, and so on, they all did everything manually, payroll, everything. But there was a data center. When they did everything manually, there were some things that they would send the files to the data center, like, every couple of days. And the data center was like, those are the, IT people, like tech people of the time. And you just had like 2 computers in there, and these people were in there putting in data every day and printing out things. So when I got there now, they were actually changing over everything, and they were going into a regular distributed system with, a distributed system, nice, thing. Everybody had to have their own computers at their desk and so on. So we had to deploy this new system, train the people and so on. And one of the things that we had to do was to restructure the organization, because the problem now is that the way that the system is set up, it did not separate motor vehicles from property. There was just an underwriting section. And everybody who did underwriting was required to learn how to underwrite anything. Because it's just underwriting is really the same thing, figuring out what the risk is, figuring out what the value of the thing that's being underwritten, that's being insured is, figuring out what the premium is, and so on. And the system was going to do that for them. So we had to retrain everybody now so that you could use the system to underwrite whatever it was. And the claims was the same thing. So in other words, where you would have had 4 heads of departments, 2 for underwriting and 2 for claims, you know what happened? You ended up with 1 for underwriting and 1 for claims, and somebody had to become a regular underwriter. So change it so that the fact that this software was designed, the architecture of the software was a particular way, it impacted upon how the organization was structured. Does that make sense? Okay, an architecture can provide the basis for evolutionary or even throwaway prototyping. The idea is that your architecture can help you to develop a prototype, and a prototype that might be in high fidelity that you can take to a client, and it gives you some good feedback about your requirements without you having to have a detailed requirements document. And that can be useful in an agile development environment. So another area where software architecture is very important, even though sometimes people don't really see. People think of agile development environments as being completely like document free. It's like all sticky notes and programmers. In agile development environments, the ability to determine sprint velocity, the ability to figure out what you can do during a sprint and so on, and who is supposed to do what, and when different parts of your project should start, what you should include in an increment, can be very, very well supported by having a documented architecture, because you can see the different parts. So you can put them on your product background and assign them to different increments. And architecture is the key artifact that allows the architect and project manager to reason about cost and schedule. And architecture can be created as a transferable, reusable model that forms the heart of a product line. You know what's a product line? You know what's a product line? So it's usually like a family of products. So like Microsoft Office, you have PowerPoint, Word, Excel, and so on. And you see there are architectural similarities. Yeah, how they deal with persistence, how they deal with displaying things, how they deal with the user interface is very, very similar, and so on. And architecture-based development focuses attention on the assembly of components rather than simply on their creation. By restricting design alternatives, architecture channels the creativity of the developers, reducing design and system complexity. You're to leave everything open to programmers. System will just be very, very, very complex, because most programmers have a lot of things that they know, a lot of skills, and they would like to use most of the skills in any given project. And that doesn't work well for the future of the system. Having a well-defined architecture, as I said, it constrains how you can develop the system. And that's generally good. It can be bad if it is that architecture is not well done. But once you have an architecture that satisfies or addresses the true business requirements, the requirements of your clients and so on, then that's a good thing, because it means that the project can finish faster. Your project can be more accurate and satisfy more the needs of the user. It can be less complex and easier to maintain and understand and transfer knowledge and so on. By restricting design alternatives, an architecture can be the foundation of training a new team member. Gosh, I thought I was going to move fast with this picture. All right, so the main point that I wanted to bring out here is that there are a couple of things that drive your software architecture. And the lecture that I did for Mr. Anderson last semester, we spoke about them too. The fact that there are some requirements. If you can look at the requirements document, there are some requirements that drive your architecture, but not all of them. So the majority of functional requirements have nothing to do with your software architecture. Isn't that interesting? You can actually not know functional requirements for a system. You can actually not know 80% of the functional requirements for a system and still be able to develop an accurate architecture, a perfectly suitable architecture for a system. And that's because architecture is related to the satisfaction of non-functional requirements. So you can know, what do I put it now? So they're called architecturally significant requirements. And the first set of architecturally significant requirements are just a few of the functional requirements. And those functional requirements have the functional requirements that are directly related to the business goal for which the system is being developed. So for example, if you're developing an inventory management system, although you have a functionality like logging out, display this, and so on, they may not be architecturally significant because of the fact that that's not what caused the system to be necessary. Those requirements are important because of, that's how people will use the system. But what is going to be most important is, can you add an inventory item? Can you delete an inventory item might not be architecturally significant. But can you put something in there? Can you view what is available? And can you request to borrow one or something and assign it to somebody? Those would be architecturally significant functional requirements. The others would not be. Because without them, or should I say not without them, but the others are not what caused it, but those were not needs that caused you to have to turn to the software, right? Constraints, so in your architecture document, in your requirements document, remember you have a section that describes different kinds of constraints. Those are usually all drivers for architecture design. So things like, oh, the organization is committed to a program that they have with Microsoft, and all their products that they develop must be using the .NET framework. That is extremely significant architecturally because it tells you something about the context within which you can develop the software in terms of architecture. It tells you that you're gonna have to follow you can't go beyond the architectural solutions available under .NET design. Quality attributes such as high performance, high availability, ease of evolution, security, and so on. Those are your non-functional requirements, and they also constrain what you can do architecturally. So those are architecturally significant. So how do you go about designing your architecture? Well, you do preliminary documentation or sketches of the structures. Remember the structures we spoke about? Yeah? So if you want to think about the physical aspect, you might think about, okay, how am I going to deploy this system? They might do a deployment diagram. You want to think about, how are we going to organize the code so that we can make sure the system is modifiable. Then you have to think about something like package diagrams, class diagrams, right? Where you can set dependency structure. Which structures you look at are dependent on the quality attributes that are important to you. So for example, with modifiability, if you couldn't care less whether the system is modifiable or not because you're just going to use it for 1 year and throw it away, and it doesn't serve any other purpose and you won't need to upgrade it or anything, then you might not care to look at the package diagram. It might not matter to you from an architectural standpoint how the classes are organized. Package diagrams are your decisions about how you're going to organize classes and packages. Usually have to do you making thinking through which things are likely to change, which things are less likely to change, and making a decision about what the dependency relationships between classes will be in light of that. If the project is large, if there are distributed teams collaborating, there are significant technical challenges that effort in more formal architecture documentation will eventually repeat. So you can also take, as I was telling you earlier on, a very formal approach to documentation, and that can be very relevant if you have teams of persons working on the system in the future over a long period of time and in different locations. You're not going to be like sitting in one room and chatting with each other and have some sticky notes and some sketches on a whiteboard and you can talk through it and collaborate with each other very easily. But no, there's a team of people in India, a team in the Netherlands, and a team in Jamaica and some people in Trinidad. You need very, very formal documentation for those positions. And there are standards for doing it. All right, so once you have documented your architecture, one of the things that you want to be able to do is evaluate your architecture. And there are also standards and rules and methodologies that you can use for evaluating architecture. One of them is ATAM, which is architecture trade-off analysis method, ATAM. And that is a set of procedures that you can use for looking at an architecture and talking with an architect, or a team of architects and stakeholders as well. Evaluate an architecture. You don't need to develop the system first, the architect. So you don't need to develop the system first in order to evaluate it. You can evaluate it from the documentation perspective. So you take the documentation and you start asking certain questions, looking for certain things. As an analyst, you have to look at what were the original requirements, make sure that you're clear on what those were, what were the important quality attributes, the business goals and things like that. And then you're scrutinizing this document, scrutinizing all the structures that have been documented to determine whether or not these requirements are being satisfied. Does that make sense? So that's evaluation. You will want to start doing evaluation once you have gone a good distance. You can do it. It can be done during the architectural design process if it is that you're using like an agile approach to architecture design. You can evaluate per iteration if you want to. You can do the whole design, the whole architectural design, and then evaluate it as well. You can also evaluate the architecture after you're finished implementing the system, but obviously that is it's almost not useful, because if you have finished implementing the system, it doesn't matter what you find when you evaluate it, you will have to use it, right? So a recommendation there is that if the project is large, it's very important, like people who are in aviation, people who are in doing software for automobiles, and so on. Very often the evaluation team, there might be internal evaluation, but you have people who are third parties who are trained and certified to evaluate software, especially for embedded systems and systems in mission critical types of equipment. They can be brought in as third parties to evaluate. It's usually not very sensible to evaluate something that you developed yourself, right? Because you just don't see your flaws sometimes. You need to implement the architecture now, because you have created it, you documented it, and you evaluated it. Major responsibility during implementation is to ensure conformance to the code of the code to the design. If developers are not faithfully implementing the architecture, they may be undermining the qualities that you have designed into the architecture. What is the role of an architect? An architect is much more than just a designer. This role, which may be played by one or more individuals, has a long list of duties, skills, and knowledge that are necessary to be successful. And we spoke about this at the very beginning of the lecture. It includes leadership, communication, negotiation, technical skills, project skills, and analytical skills. And that's basically it. You can look at the rest of the brief history of ADD. That's not really so important. But ADD is a particular method for designing architecture. So apart from you just arbitrarily developing the architecture, or just arbitrarily picking a design pattern because it looks like it will work, there's actually a whole process that you can use to design your architecture step by step and evaluate it. And this can also be used in agile environments as well as waterfall environments. So that's basically it. Architects are important, architectures are important to design an architecture. Well, you also need to consider other lifecycle activities such as requirements, documentation, evaluation, and of course implementation. And if you wish to, there may be a course in architecture next year. There may be a course in software architecture when you're in third year. And if you feel like it, you could try. All right.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, I think it would be. I think it will be. Oh, there are comments here. What? Oh, it's working now. Okay. Okay. All right. Persons online were able to follow through the presentation properly. I noticed that there was apparently a problem at the beginning. Everybody's good? All right, that's it for today. Do you have any questions? Okay. All right, it was good. Okay. I wish that you guys were talking to me though. That's the only thing. I see that you say it was good. It would have been good to hear from you. All right. Bye.